In the heart of Latin America and the Caribbean, where vibrant cultures thrive and diverse communities flourish, aviation plays a pivotal role in shaping destinies. Here, aviation isn't just a mode of transportation, it's the artery that pulses with life, uniting families, igniting passions, and bridging distances. Even in the most remote corners, where roads fade into jungles or dissolve in ocean breezes, aviation emerges as a beacon of hope and progress, connects isolated communities to vital resources, and ensures that no one is left beyond reach. Fueling trade and commerce, aviation uplifts economies, enabling local crafts to soar to global markets and empowering communities with economic vitality. In this vibrant tapestry of cultures, aviation becomes the gateway for traditions to intermingle, for stories to be shared, and for connections to blossom. It's the conduit of knowledge, granting students access to global education, fostering scientific collaboration, and paving the way for a brighter future. In Latin America and the Caribbean, aviation isn't just about flights. It's the lifeline that weaves communities together, propelling progress and connecting the spirit of this rich and diverse land.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our last day of the conference. We start by reminding you that we have simultaneous translation available for English and Spanish. If needed, the headsets are at the entrance of the room. Muy buenos días a todos, bienvenidos al último día de nuestra conferencia. Les recordamos que tenemos traducción simultánea para inglés y español. De requerirlos, los audífonos se encuentran disponibles a la entrada del salón. Iniciamos con el keynote. We begin with the keynote, Change is a Constant. With Michael Lindenberg, Managing Director of Deutsche Bank, Michael will address the dynamics and the ongoing transformations in the global economic landscape and in the aviation industry. Welcome, Michael.
Can you hear me? Good. Well, good morning, everyone. Bright and early. I think. By the way, any big jackpots last night? I saw a few of you at the slots, the high stakes tables last night when I was going up to my room at around 11 p.m. It looked like some of you were just getting ready to kind of settle in for a few hours. Well, anyway, good luck, hopefully. Anyway. As many of you know, Mike Lindenberg, I'm an equity research analyst at Deutsche Bank, and I do cover the airline industry, both U.S. and Latin American airline stocks. So when you think about our role, we're the person who buys, sells, holds. We tell you which stocks to own, which ones to sell. I thought it was actually rather fitting that the presentations or the conference this year was going to be held at a casino. Because I think, as many of you know, Wall Street is the world's biggest casino. So I feel like I'm in my element. So thank you. Thank you for holding it at a casino. Anyway, I want to thank ALTA, Jose Ricardo. Thank you again for giving me the opportunity, the privilege to present. Also, I had the opportunity to spend some time with Willie Walsh yesterday, providing some sobering views on the industry, and more specifically, the industry's commitment to SAF and trying to get to net carbon zero by 2050. Obviously a daunting challenge, and I know for many of the management teams in this room, it's something that they're very much focused on. So today's presentation, as you've seen in the past, we like to sort of hit big picture views. One, we want to focus on a little bit of the macro, then we touch on the micro, talk about some of the changes to the industry, and then issues or concerns as we look out to 2025 and really beyond. When we look at that first bullet, we talk about the balanced macro backdrop. Right now, actually, things seem pretty well. If I had to give a grade to the global economy, maybe a B plus. If we look at global GDP this year, expected to come in at 3.2% per the IMF, 3.2% next year as well. So decent, not great, but not bad either. The bigger concern are the geopolitical tensions that we touch on here. I think, as we're all aware, we're watching what's going on between Russia and Ukraine. We're watching what's going on in the Middle East. But we also have a U.S. election. And that's a few days away. We're about 5-6 days away from the U.S. election. And that could have some meaningful implications. Well, it will have implications. But depending on which way it goes, it could have greater implications on our sector. And we'll touch on that. So let's take a quick look at Latin America GDP. As I said, 3.2% globally for 2024 and 2025. The IMF just updated numbers recently. They actually raised 2024 for Latin America, took it up a few tenths of a point to 2.1%, took down 2025 by a few tenths, went from about 2.7 to 2.5. Brazil this year is expected to come in at 3%. So that's been raised by over a point. You know, I recall about a year and a half ago, people were worried about Brazil potentially going into recession. It's actually come back pretty strongly. Mexico, on the other hand, is only growing about 1.5%. In fact, that was one of the biggest downgrades for 2024 and 2025. And I think the concern is just about the changeover in the government. There's a lot of regulation. The view is that Mexico is maybe not pro-business. We've seen some of the policies out there. Certainly not the most embracing of the Mexican airline industry. Very frustrating to see some of the policy initiatives that have been pushed in Mexico. Despite all of that, the Mexican airlines are actually doing quite well. You know, both the public and well, there's one public and the two private names. So Mexico, a bit of a concern. Also, the IMF a bit concerned about how Mexico is going to be tightening, monetary tightness. And that's very different than most of the rest of the world. Most countries are going through an easing cycle. At least we've started one, right? We had our first rate cut in the US. Mexico's tightening, so is Brazil. Brazil is also raising rates. Net, that should help their currencies, and we'll talk about that in a few seconds. Interest rates. So the orange line is where interest rates were a year ago. The green line is where they are now. The airline industry is capital intensive. We care a lot about the cost of capital. As interest rates start to come down, that's important. If you look at where the 10-year is right now, that's the whole curve. The 10-year is just above 4%, 4.2%. So that's down about 1%, a little bit less than 1% from a year ago. But more importantly, that's actually up about 0.5% over the last 3-4 months. And what you're seeing play out in the markets right now is that at least the US markets are discounting a Trump win, what they call the Trump trade. And the concern is that if Trump comes into power, you'll see higher inflation. And as a result of that, you'll see higher interest rates. The higher inflation is partially driven by not only government spending, but it's also going to be driven by tariffs, and I think I heard somebody say that. And in fact, the IMF, when they look at GDP over the next couple of years, the concern is around tariffs. And the impact to global GDP is about 0.5%. So we're talking about, you know, $500 billion on global GDP if the US starts imposing significant tariffs, and then you start seeing it around the world. Because once one country imposes higher tariffs, you tend to see something in response. And so that is a potential concern there. And the higher interest rates could mean a stronger dollar. And which brings us to our next chart, which we show several currencies. The purple, the blue, and the yellow would be developed markets. That's the yen, that's the pound, and the euro. And you can see that they have held up much better than the green and the red, which are the real, also the Mexican peso. Those currencies selling off have been very impactful, especially for some of the Latin carriers, where about 60 to 70%, maybe 60, 70% of their costs are in dollars. When they buy airplanes, they borrow in dollars. When they pay for fuel, they pay for in dollars. When they buy insurance on the global market, it's priced in dollars. And so that's been an impact. And where you've seen it right now in the news We see it with Azul going through a restructuring process because they have a lot of dollar-denominated debt, and it's been weighing on the company. And unlike some of their competitors who went through a more formal restructuring through the courts, a Chapter 11 process, they did not, and now they're working through it. That's been a headwind, and yet despite the fact that we have rates potentially coming down in the US, or at least that's where we are today, before the election, and we have rates going up in places like Brazil, you would think that the currencies would start to improve. But right now the market is telling you that that's not going to happen. That first rate cut that we saw, maybe we get another 25 or 50 basis points in the US, but that may be the end of it if we get into a world where we have a lot more tariffs and we have higher inflation. And that's where we are today. We look at global equity markets. You can see we're back up to an all-time high. The numbers on there are in the trillions. So the global stock markets are now back up north of $120 trillion. The reason I look at this is because the stock market is a function of overall health. Corporate profits, consumers, very important to Latin American carriers, for corporate travel, for high-end leisure. Those households are doing really well. But if you look at our title there, it talks about global equities at all-time highs, but there's a difference between developed markets and emerging markets. We've seen the US markets and European markets and other developed markets perform much better. We've seen money actually outflow, money come out of markets like Mexico and Brazil, and we'll talk about that in a minute or two. Jet fuel prices, though, are at lows, at least 2.5-year lows. Those different lines there, the red line is New York Harbor. You can see where it spiked when Russia invaded Ukraine back in February of 2022. You can see the blue is Singapore, the green is Rotterdam, I believe, and then we have Gulf Coast in yellow. But you can see this is a good thing. Even if even if priced in dollars, even if your currency is depreciated against the dollar, all in, you're seeing a better price today than what you were seeing 2.5 years ago. So that's a nice positive as we move over towards the micro. Now this chart looks at capacity growth by different regions. A few years ago when I showed this chart, there was no green. It was all red, it was orange, it was yellow. Supply was down in so many markets. On this chart here, and by the way, my slides are available for anybody who wants them. More than happy that ALTA will email them to you. Green is good, and this looks at year-over-year capacity growth by month. We have from March to December of 2024, and then the 3 months of 2025. These are what the schedules look like today. Now you see some orange there. Capacity is down. The markets that are in yellow on the left-hand side of the page are Latin markets, the markets we care about. Argentina domestic. Is anybody surprised here that capacity is down 20-25%? It's been a very difficult market historically to compete in. But we have a new administration. Does anybody here want to buy aerolíneas? You may have carriers who want to move into the domestic market. There may be some opportunities. So, that's one to watch. Look at Mexico domestic. That's also orange. But that's not because of the economy. That's because 2 of the 3 largest airlines, a large portion of their fleet, are powered by geared turbofan engines. Many of those airplanes are grounded. And so as a result, they've reallocated more of their capacity to Mexico International, and that's right below, and you can see that's green. It's not growing a lot, but that's where the capacity is going. And so I always like to look at this chart as a sense of whether markets are healthy or not. Germany is right above Mexico domestic. They have orange as well. Volkswagen reported this morning their profits are down 42%. They're looking at laying off people. Germany's GDP growth rate for 2024 is expected to be 0, and maybe grow a few tenths next year. And so you can see how it's having an impact. And the numbers there by country, that represents all capacity. So if it says Germany, that's not only domestic, but it's all international. It's all capacity to and from Germany. So that's an all-encompassing number. Doesn't look great. I'm sure some of you saw the headlines. We talked about it yesterday with Willie about Lufthansa getting out of Frankfurt to Beijing. Some of that has more to do with the inability to fly over Russia because of what's going on with the war there. But, I suspect that, if that market was doing really well, they would still find a way to keep it up and running. Another trend that we like to look at, global corporate travel. This is the Global Business Travel Association, and what you'll see from 2024, we're almost back to 2019. We go to 2025, and you can see it's $1.6 trillion. That's global business travel. Put out, it's followed by a survey by the Global Business Travel Association that includes air, hotel, car rental, taxi, limousine service. That's a good number. That's tied to global corporate profits. So that jump from 1.2 to 1.6, it's a nice move. Many carriers I know historically, didn't play as much in the corporate travel space. We have low-fare carriers out there who are mostly focused on discretionary. But when I look at the big Latin carriers like a LATAM, an Aeromexico, a Copa, Azul, Avianca, they have a sizable amount of corporate travel. I'm not sure I'm sure some of you have been to the LATAM lounge in Santiago, that high-end lounge. It's one of the most beautiful lounges in the Western Hemisphere. It may actually, be one of the top 3 in the world. You can see who they cater to. That's an important customer. If we look at corporate travel, though, as a percentage of global GDP, what we'll see, though, is that we're still not back on a percentage-wise. We still have a ways to go. So 2024 or 2025 is going to be 1.6 trillion, and it's just at 1.4%. If I go back pre-2019, all the way back to 2000, you'll see that it was in this 1.516 to as high as 1.9%. So there's still more upside. And again, that's a function of global corporate profits. Now this chart, this just shows different markets, and this is from a US carrier perspective. All the markets, all the major geographies, what the year-over-year passenger volumes look like. What everyone in this room mostly cares about is Mexico, which is yellow, and Latin ex-Mexico, which is purple, and they're low. In fact, Mexico is actually now negative. So it looks like from this chart, year over year, they're not doing as well as Pacific. They're not doing as well as, say, a Canada. A lot of this has to do with the fact that Central America, South America, Latin America as a whole recovered much sooner. And so we're at a more normal environment. It's also a function of capacity coming out. We're seeing a good amount of capacity come out of some of those markets. From a US carrier perspective, it's Frontier and Spirit. I'm sure many of you are aware of the fact that low-fare airlines in the US right now are struggling. Many of them are not making money. The primary reason is that it's an oversupplied market. We have 8 airlines, 6 publicly traded and 2 private, that are all going after the price-sensitive customer. Doesn't make any sense. We only have 3 big airlines that will take you to London. 3 US airlines that will take you to London or Sao Paulo or Sydney or Tokyo. But we have 8 airlines that will take you from Dallas to Cancun. Well, guess what? They're all losing money, and so, or almost all of them are losing money. And as a result, in the December quarter, you're going to see Spirit and Frontier cut their capacity from the US to Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean by 15%. Because they're losing money on more than half their routes in that market. So that's good for some of the competitors here, because it's too much, and that's why it shows up in that number. My point earlier about the year-over-years don't look as good for Latin America versus, say, Canada or the Pacific. Look at it on a 5-year basis. This is year-to-date passenger volumes, the top 22 trading partners with the US on an air travel basis versus 2019. Any of the bars that are green are Latin American countries. And so with the exception of Brazil, that's down 12% versus 2019, for the 9 months through September of this year versus the 9 months of September 2019, you will see, and by the way, it's ranked by order of size. So Canada and Mexico makes sense. They are a source and a destination of the most number of passengers. And so what you'll see is that Mexico's up 28% since 2019. And then we can see Dominican Republic up 35%. I mentioned Brazil down 12, Colombia up 43%, Jamaica up 7. The Bahamas, you can see just up, it looks like it's up 1. Panama up 11, Costa Rica up over 30%. And it shows you how those markets have bounced back, and they've been very resilient. Those continue to be very popular destinations for Americans, and we expect that, these trends will continue into 2025. This is the best part, though, about over the last few years, is seeing the global airline industry get back to profitability. And we broke it out by region, but I think the real success story here is to see Latin America right up there, right up against, sort of neck and neck with Europe, slightly higher than Europe expected to be in 2024, with about a 6% operating margin. You can see the Middle East is at top, followed by North America, and then Latin America, Europe. And so the last 2 years, it's been a very good story. If we look at it more closely and just look at Latin America and look at total operating profits and margin by itself, you can see in 2023, it says estimate because we don't have all of the numbers. Some of the companies, should say many of the companies actually in Latin America are private. So the data comes in very late. But you can see that the estimate is that operating profits will be over $1 billion, and then by 2024, it looks like operating profits are going to close into close to $3 billion, and you can see the 6% operating margin. So a very good success story. And by the way, it's been a very difficult environment, and yet the industry was able to get through COVID. And I think it's important when I look around the world, and I look at which airlines receive meaningful support from their governments. Latin America got very little to none, right? The US got support, China got support, Middle Eastern airlines got support, European airlines got support. So when I go back to the original title of this presentation, that change is the constant. We sort of think about the airlines that embraced the change, that they were willing to evolve. And as much as the restructuring process a lot of times comes with a stigma, the fact is almost every US airline has gone through the Chapter 11 process, and they've come out a lot stronger. And I think one of the key takeaways from my presentation is when I look around this region and I see the emergence of LATAM and Avianca and Aeromexico, and you have Copa, who didn't go through the restructuring process, but has always been a formidable carrier. And we now have Azul going through a restructuring process, as well as GOL. The 5 or 6 top airlines in this region are going to be not only very strong within this region, but they're going to be very strong globally. And like I go back to that point, you fly LATAM out of Santiago, they have a much better lounge than American or United. Delta actually, I guess, gets to use that lounge, right? Because they're partners. At least they think they do. So maybe Delta lucked out. But you can see where they have become very competitive globally. The December quarter, which we're in right now, this gives you a sense of what's driving the profitability. And I broke it down by the various subcomponents. Because there are only 4 publicly traded Latin carriers, this is aggregate for Copa, Volaris, LATAM, and Azul. And what you'll see, the December quarter historically is one of the stronger, seasonally strongest quarters for the Latin American industry. You'll see that in 2023, the industry did about $900 million of operating profit. And those 4 carriers, so this is aggregate, I'm adding them up. And for this year, we think it's going to be over $1 billion. And what you can see is a big part of it is traffic. That's the green, that's up $480 million. I know the numbers are small, but about $500 million is just higher volumes. Yields are down. Some of it's exchange, it's related to foreign exchange, but some of its yields, and cargo is down a little bit. Cargo was coming off of a peak through COVID. We saw a down year last year. We're seeing cargo stabilize, so cargo is only off a little bit. And then you can see the other categories. Aircraft fuel is green because it's a positive. It's contributing $200 million, $207 million to operating profit just because fuel prices are low. But look at the impact of inflation. Look at salaries and wages. Look at D&A, aircraft ownership, right? Other expenses, they're all in the red. So that's inflation coming through, but the Latin American carriers, at least the 4 publicly traded carriers, are finding a way to offset those inflationary pressures with better volumes. $500 million, so it's pretty meaningful. When we talk about change and change is the constant, I thought just looking at the Colombia market would give you have a sense of about, the more things change, the more they remain the same. It's fascinating to see that the Colombia domestic market in the month of October is actually 5% larger than what it was 2 years ago. And yet everybody knows we lost 2 carriers, right? Viva and ALTA. And yet you can see it was backfilled by the remaining carriers. And then there's a new competitor there in the gray, JetSmart. They now represent 8% of the market. This is based on seats. So the numbers would be a little bit different if I did it on an ASK basis, but we were looking at seats, and it's the domestic market. We're only looking at domestic. It's up 5% on a 2-year basis, but from 2022 to October of 2023, it fell by about 20%. So you can see how quickly that void was filled. But I would argue the reason why ALTA and Viva Air Colombia failed was that it was an oversupplied market. Today, I still think Colombia domestic is an oversupplied market. I think the leaders, Avianca and LATAM, can do well in the domestic market, given their position. But if I were to look at every single region throughout South America right now, this is actually one of the most challenging. I mean, it was oversupplied then, it's probably oversupplied right now. The last thing that I want to point to before we talk about just some of the future issues is that at the end of the day, we do look to the stocks as a validation about whether or not the companies are succeeding. And if I look at stocks to date, the yellow represent the Latin American carriers. Now we know Azul is going through a restructuring. So the shares at the bottom, one represents the Brazilian shares, one represents the US shares. And then as we move up, we see Copa is down 5%. And then as we look up through there, we can see, and Volaris is also down. The only one that's up is LATAM. And that's actually since they did their IPO in the US back in July. So that only represents a return over the last 2 months, which is actually quite good, that you make 12% in 2 months. And then you can see some of the US carriers. But I think it's important to note that the stock market is not only reflective of fundamentals and overall financial performance, but there are other issues or factors that we refer to as systematic. They're tied to the system. They have less to do with the company, and they have much more to do with the market. And what we have seen is that Latin American markets have not been the best places to invest, largely because of what has been going on globally with exchange rates and the Fed. And so coming into 2024, if I was talking to you in December last year, November, I would have said you want to own emerging market stocks. More specifically, you want to be buying Latin American stocks. And why? Because last year, at around this point in time, the view was that the Fed was going to cut rates 6 times. And we were going to see the dollar weaken. And one of the best backdrops, best times to invest in emerging markets or developing markets is when the dollar is weakening and when the Fed is cutting rates. And yet we had to wait all the way until September before we saw our first rate cut. And we really haven't seen the dollar weaken. And so that is what has been driving the stock prices, not the financial performance. And that's why I led up to this slide with all the goodness that we were seeing in the region by the industry leaders. So sometimes the scoreboard gets it wrong. The thing about the scoreboard is that the game goes on for some time. It's a very long game. And so, next year at this point in time, I expect to see all the Latin American stocks up in the green. I'm an optimistic person, but I still think, those that embrace the change are the ones that are going to succeed. This just talks about longer term. Yesterday afternoon, when I spent time with Willie Walsh, just to refresh everybody, this is how we get to net zero carbon. It just talks about the offsetting measures that are based, and this represents sort of the growth of carbon emissions around the world. As many of you know, the global airline industry represents about just over 2%, and so that has to be addressed. That is an issue. I'm going to just jump through it quickly. This slide just talks about the fact that SAF, 65% of how the global airline industry gets there. We talked about it yesterday afternoon. Talks about the SAF requirements. And how do we get there? I think it's just the numbers that matter. 2-3 months ago, if somebody asked me, what is it going to cost the global airline industry to get to net zero carbon, I would have said, well, IATA is saying it's $3+ trillion between now and 2050. Well, about a month ago, they put out a new financial roadmap and a policy roadmap, and they updated it. It's $4.7 trillion, which equates to about $175 billion a year on a global industry that this year is going to have a good year, 2024, and generate about $30 billion of net profits. So we're at the end point. I'm looking at the time. I know I'm over. Just a summary on what we talked about. The election is the next big event. I don't know if I have any time for questions, or we may have to go on to the next panel since I know that I'm a little bit over. So I'm going to thank you for your time. Maybe if anybody has a question. If not, you can also reach out to me as I walk through the audience.
We now continue with the following panel presented by CITA. We will discuss how technology and innovation is boosting air cargo in the region and opportunities ahead. Please welcome our moderator, Carlos Garcia, Partner Transportation and Services of Oliver Wyman, and the speakers, Paulo Almada, CEO of Total Líneas Aéreas, Jitendra Sindhuani, President and Head of Global Sales and Marketing of IBS Software, Diogo Elias, SVP Avianca Cargo, Andres Bianchi, CEO LATAM Cargo, and Basil Khalil, VP of Operations FedEx.
Good morning, everyone. I know that it has been a busy agenda, so for those of you that you're here, very glad to see that you decided to stay here rather than going to the beach, so that's quite exciting. And what I thought is, look, we have many panels, and sometimes it's difficult to keep track about everything that we learn and that we listen to. So the objective of this discussion today is I want everyone in this room to take 3 things home. So that's the objective. So first is, we want to discuss about the cargo market, the evolution, and what are the opportunities. Then we want to talk about what are some of the challenges that we see and understand what are the different airlines doing, but also understand what are some of the things needed from the industry and some of the associations, like for example ALTA, to address some of those challenges. And third, I want to talk about what is the top priority, because what I would like to do is in 2025 in Lima to say, guys, we discussed last year that this is the top priority. How did we do during the past 12 months? So that seems like a reasonable approach. I would like to start with Diogo and maybe learn a little bit more from your perspective, what has happened in the market maybe since COVID, and what do you see evolving in the next few years?
Sure. Well, first of all, good morning, everybody. Thank you for Botelho to organize this as ALTA. It's always a pleasure to be here. Also speaking about cargo, not only passenger side. So for the cargo side, when we look pre-COVID, COVID, and post-COVID, you see the volumes. We all know what happened with the capacity. Just a quick reminder, this was like all the capacity for belly side was out. And then the freighters were shining at the time, just right after COVID 2020, 2021. So there were mainly freighters from the airlines and the integrators, just as FedEx, flying for 95% of the capacity over there. So there was still a lot of cargo, but yet a lot of yields going up. And then when we consider post-COVID to 2022 to 2023, we see those belly capacity going up, and the cargo settling down, so a lot of pressure on the load factor, and then for sure yields going down. So when we were at this time last year here, we were in the trend of still going down, markets still a little shaky, especially in Latin America, for all the imports not going up, and all the perishables that we do have many as an export of Latin America, steady. But now the thing is shifting again for the last, I guess the focus from the last year, from this year, was a lot on the cost side, on the capacity side, because everybody trying to adjust to a tougher market than we are seeing now. And from 2023, what we're seeing in the capacity side is almost all the ASKs, as we just saw. It's back, especially in Latin America. Still China and some of the Asian Pacific still less than 2019. But what we're seeing now, all the volumes that we all heard going out of China, if you look at the export of China, when in 2019 it used to be the same as the import volume. Now it's 11 times bigger, the export than the import in China. And that's especially all the e-commerce going out of China. And now they're hitting, for the last 6 months, 8 months, much bigger than in Latin America than it was before. So what we see is a lot of imports, flux going into Latin America, and some of the capacity shifting to Asia. So that's why we see also a pressure, not only in the pressure in the good way for the airline, in the better load factors and better yields for the last 3 or 4 months, and we see a nice trend on that. So still very cyclical business. We did our homework in terms of cost, I guess everybody in terms of capacity. A lot of capacity was ordered in the last 2 years, and now they're getting back not only the SKs and the freighters, but you see the shift and a big influence of the e-commerce coming into Latin America.
Okay. Well, glad to hear, right, that there is a positive trend, and I know that this is very cyclical. But Andres, from your perspective, we just heard like the growth of e-commerce, but so typically when you see that growth, right, like what is really happening? So what do you expect to happen during the coming years? And also, what is happening to what is not e-commerce? Because I don't think that we talk enough about it.
Well, first of all, good morning to everybody. And thanks for ALTA for organizing this. I think that when you try to answer the question, what do you expect on air freight, you're bound to make huge mistakes. So I'll just put the fine print out there that this is a tricky one. I mean, first to the point of e-commerce. When you look at global numbers, I mean, e-commerce prior to the pandemic was about 5 to 10% of global volume. Now it's up to 15 to 20. And global volumes are roughly flat. So that means that non-e-commerce cargo actually took a big hit from the beginning of the pandemic through here. It's probably down 15 to 20%. So it's kind of a question of the missing cargo, where did it go? Part of it is just substitution for e-commerce. Part of it's something that you can make a lot of hypotheses about what happened. I mean, the replacement cycle for things like computers just accelerated during the pandemic. People are not changing computers right now. They will eventually do so in a couple of years' time. So what you could expect is sort of a rebound on the non-e-commerce cargo that could actually boost the industry going forwards. Having said that, I think the quick question is what happens to e-commerce? And when I think about e-commerce, usually we think about why do you buy things via the web? It's convenience. I mean, it's easier to buy sometimes things through the web. Inventory, especially in South America, you get access to a lot more products when you buy from a cross-border platform that has access to the, I don't know, size 44 Air Jordans that you cannot buy in South America. And last but not least, price. And as a customer, and what do we bring to the table as airlines? We bring the transit time and the reliability. So those are the 5 key elements when you forecast what can happen to e-commerce. I think the big question mark is what happened to price. And why? Because of the enactment of a lot of new regulations at destination that are eliminating the tax benefits that e-commerce platforms have. I mean, the de minimis, which is the level of the value threshold below which you don't pay taxes, is being eliminated in many countries. So that's actually making increase the tax burden on a lot of e-commerce shipments. That will probably also happen in the US. And that may disrupt the lower end of the e-commerce market to some extent. How much will that impact? We don't know yet. We're starting to see the first countries doing so. Brazil was the first. So that's kind of the big question mark. But overall, what would you think is e-commerce should remain strong, and the recovery of the non-e-commerce volumes should drive volumes up in the next couple of years at least?
Thank you for shining light on what may happen during the coming years. Something that in line with this is also quite interesting is Paulo. When we were discussing yesterday, so you were telling me about the ambitious growth target for total Linux areas. So I don't know if you can maybe talk a little bit about that growth that you see in the market is mainly driven by passenger, by cargo, both. So, yeah.
Well, Total is a 36 years old airline in Brazil. We became a partner of the company about a year ago. The challenge is when you get something in cargo business working only to the government and change that to work to the market is a challenge. So we grow about 100% this year. I think in the cargo business, we become the secondary this year airline in Brazil, and next year we predict to be the first one. Passenger side is very important, of course, because the world is changing. When I take a look to the future, what I see is robotics and artificial intelligence, what is going to bring people to tourist flights. Business. You do business all over the internet, you do business all over the flights, you can even fly and come into Nassau like we've been doing today, but all of that is going to be changed. I went to China this month. What I see by my eyes is a completely different feature what everybody's talking about right now. Cargo is very important. It's going to be even more important because delivering things is going to be almost 80% of the market. So shopping malls, everything is about to disappear in the near future.
Okay, well, definitely we need to be ready for that. Something that is also quite interesting is the evolution of new products, specialized products. So, Basil, I would like to get your thoughts into what is happening with the pharmaceutical cargo business, and maybe talk a little bit also about the role of FedEx in the region.
Sure, thank you. And Carlos and ALTA, thank you for the opportunity to share some of our thoughts related to this very important industry. When talking about pharma, we need to talk about what's happening in the pharmaceutical industry. And really, there's a major transformation with the progress of biotechnologies, gene therapies, cell therapies. The whole logistical model for how to distribute that has changed and needs to change over the coming years to meet the growing demand and solving some of the ailments that people are dealing with as the population gets older around the world. Some of these products require temperature control, right? It's not about just getting it there quickly, which is obviously an important thing because it's perishable. But as many of us know with the vaccines, some of like the Pfizer vaccines, you needed to be in between -60 and -90 degrees Celsius. So there's clearly a change in the infrastructure, processes, and procedures that need to happen in the logistics supply chain. As an integrator, one of the things that we have really tried to do is solve for this particular problem. We have made massive investments over the last 5 to 7 years in infrastructure. For example, Puerto Rico is really a manufacturing hub for pharmaceutical goods, and we have made investments there to have good cold temperature controlled environments. In Miami, we added a 70,000 square foot cold room infrastructure and tripled the size of our on-airport space. The reason we're doing all of this is, again, that you need to maintain good temperatures. And according to IATA, over 50% of the temperature excursions happen between the airports. So you've got to change the processes there. And many of you obviously have been in the air industry for a while. Most of you have had a chance to go on a tarmac at noon in a subtropical environment. And even those ULD, the containers that we move a lot of our parcels and freight in the cargo industry, can get up as high as 55 degrees Celsius. That's 131 degrees Fahrenheit, right? That's a caja china, right? So it's one of those areas that you have to be able to manage and control your processes. And so we've made a lot of investments in having infrastructure very close, minimizing that variation that can happen from solar radiation, and then finally making investments in technology, because things break. Problems occur when you're doing logistics. We all know that. And you have to be able to monitor, intervene, be able to tell somebody, take an action, whether it's do re-icing or replace gel packs or put it in a temperature-controlled room at a certain temperature, and be able to then know that and get confirmation for our customers who are increasingly demanding that.
Okay, so if we think about these specialized products, maybe Andres, from your perspective, and what's then the role of also, so we heard from FedEx perspective and the integrator, and maybe from LATAM perspective, what are you guys doing to actually help to grow this type of business in Latin America?
I mean, Buster gave us a master class about what it takes to move, so I'm not going to bore you to death with the same detail because I think it was very illustrative. But I think it comes down to three things. I mean, you need infrastructure, and in South America, that infrastructure is sometimes lacking. We've been forced to build ourselves because the airports don't offer the infrastructure necessary to carry these products, which is something we need to address as an industry. The second is processes, and I think he's explained it very well. I mean, this is not just moving a pallet. This requires a lot of care and sort of a dedicated staff that knows how to do it. And that's where certifying your processes and working sort of every day in a very diligent manner helps you deliver the products. And also the recovery part. I mean, we've had a plane with vaccines or have a sort of to divert. And it becomes a critical thing. I mean, how do you handle that cargo when the plane diverts and it's going to be on the ground for the next 16 hours? You need to figure out where to store it, and you need to react very quickly, so information is very relevant. Now, at LATAM, I mean, we did a project years ago to build their products and take care of all these elements. And I think the best example of how we did and how we helped the region in that regard is when COVID started, we had to move all these new types of vaccines, and the requirements were very demanding. And I remember having a meeting when they asked me, like, how much money do we need to give you what you need to carry the vaccines? Not at a time that LATAM had a lot of money. I mean, we were going through a very rough patch. And we thought about it, and the answer was zero. We don't need any money. We can do all this with the infrastructure and the processes and the team that we have built. We took the risk, we did it. We moved hundreds of vaccines, hundreds of millions of vaccines during the pandemic, and we lost zero because the processes, infrastructure was already in place. So I think it's taking care of, looking the whole journey of the vaccine, so to speak, creating all the supporting infrastructure and processes, and then just delivering.
Mm-hmm. No, first of all, very glad to hear that it was very successful. I know that people really appreciated all the support that the cargo airlines did to get the vaccines. Maybe before we talk about technology, I want to also get, Diogo, your perspective. Is there any other specialized product in the region that can also help grow the Latin American market for cargo?
Sure. Well, in Avianca's home country, we move a lot of flowers. The industries, it's the biggest industry, the airline industry in Latin America. But besides flowers, we also move like a lot of fish, fruit. So all the perishables as an export out of not only South America, but also Central America, and Mexico requires a lot of care as well. Not only cold chain, not only the time that it's exposed in the high temperatures that we see in many airports across Latin America. So you have to be specialized not only how to move it, not on land side and also on the air side. So you have infrastructure counting a lot on that, on-time performance counting much on that as well, because the good thing about Latin America is that we do have a lot of perishables exports by air that requires care, but also help us to balance the southbound with the northbound, because sometimes it's hard when you fly to a specific country and you don't have any cargo to take out as an export. That helps a lot in terms of Latin America, and you see all those volumes, not only flowers, fish, and also all the fruits that we move. They perform pretty well compared to pre-COVID, during COVID as well, so they're very steady. And that's why we always depend a lot on the imports. That's why you see, as Andres commented, outside of the e-commerce, we see a lot of hit in those markets. But the perishables, it has always been there, and it takes a lot of care. Information, as one of the topics, is very important as well for the customers. But so that's why we invested as Avianca Cargo a lot in the certificate and the standards, taking all the standards with the CEIV, with the ALTA processes and standards, because that's something important to the customers, so they know they will take care of the cargo as we move.
So, Jitendra, we just heard specialized product that you need to be taking care of the temperature, perishables. What do we need from technology perspective on how can IBS support and help on this?
Yeah, from our perspective, we have to anticipate all of these changes, and we have to make sure there is a platform that's available for you to move this cargo seamlessly, effortlessly, and with all the right tools and technology that you're expecting, right? So for us, anticipating that change, investing in that change much earlier, actually becomes a very, very important aspect. And to top of that, the expectations that the clients have, what AI can do for you, for example, even if you're trying to figure that out, I think expectations are still there. So I think for us, we have to balance a few parts of how we give you a platform which can help you move this cargo in a very efficient and a predictable manner. That's number one. Number two, at the same time, how can we be very nimble in giving you this solution? Like I was, I remember when the COVID problem started and this cargo vaccine volume picked up, we had to quickly put a system in place to make sure that you can track all the aspects of how the vaccines are going to really move in a very, very timely manner, at the same time knowing that nothing is going bad actually in the operations, right? So I think there was a big push on us. And even very recently, I was sitting with one of the cargo heads of a large American carrier. And now, I don't know whether you heard about that, but there's a lot of problem related to the security data that you need on what cargo is moving. And between Europe and US, they're coming up with new policy around how to track that part. And we had to implement a new feature in literally 2 weeks' time to capture that data. So I think with the changing global environment, both in terms of volume of cargo and the type of cargo and the requirements that some of these security threats have, we have to find a platform which can manage all of those aspects. So for us, that investment in making sure all of that happens remains the topmost priority.
Okay, thanks for providing that insight. Andres, touch a little bit on this, right, and about the role of cargo into inventory, really adapting into what the market needs. But Basil, from your perspective, what's the role of cargo for those smaller countries in the region, right? What's the role that you guys are playing here?
Yeah. So one of the things that FedEx prides itself in being able to connect 220 countries and territories. And so, of course, it's not just the big markets, it's also the small and medium-sized markets. And we're in an area right now, the Caribbean, which has got a lot of small and medium-sized markets. We have been in the Caribbean for over 35 years. We had started mainly with documents and then worked our way with parcel. But to be able to make the economics work to some of these smaller markets, it's very difficult to justify a wide body or a narrow body aircraft. It's really a challenge. And for these markets to be able to be part of the global supply chain, you need to have some level of consistency. So a few years ago, we worked with some of the manufacturers, and we've made orders that we're finally receiving right now in the C408s and the ATR-72 freighters. They're large cargo doors, and essentially what we're trying to do is we're trying to open up some of these markets to be able to move freight pieces in a more consistent manner, in addition to parcel. When you introduce this consistency and reliability, it allows these markets, again, to play in global supply chains, whatever the vertical it may be. We are seeing in some of the smaller, medium-sized markets, particularly in Central America, Dominican Republic, and many others in Latin America, that the geopolitical situation is starting to allow for more regionalization, and some of them are playing in that. So hopefully this kind of consistency of being able to offer a larger portfolio of services to the small and medium customers that now have a bigger pool of customer base, hopefully helps economies thrive and grow.
Okay, so actually I have a question for you, Andres. Okay, so FedEx plays different aircraft type to help serving those smaller markets. From the perspective of LATAM, which obviously, guys, you have a fleet which is that you have restructured through Chapter 11. How are you helping also to address maybe some of the demand from that smaller markets? What's the strategy that the airline is following there?
Strategy to open up more markets, or?
Yes, like those smaller markets.
Well, I mean, we play a different game, and I would structure that in two different levels, right? One is international air freight. And when it comes down to international air freight, I think the value of the airline industry as an enabler for the growth of our economies is understated. I mean, if you look at some of the largest export industries in some of our countries, flowers in Colombia and Ecuador, salmon in Chile, they're extremely dependent on us doing a good job bringing those goods to market. Those industries wouldn't exist if there wasn't a solid air freight industry. So from that perspective, that kind of puts us on a mission of trying to deliver for those customers new and better solutions, and that's opening, let's say, spokes on different places in order to reduce time to market. Those are perishables that have shelf lives of 10, 12 days. So if you can save a couple of days of trucking within the US, that helps. Same for southbound cargo. We are serving industries that are extremely dependent on transit time. For example, the mining industry in Chile. We opened up a destination for our freighters. That's kind of unique in a way that we can bring the spare parts for the mining trucks, saving 2 or 3 days of transit time, which is really valuable for them. So it's supporting those, but using the freighter as a tool to supplement the bellies and create customized solutions for key industries. The second dimension is the domestic markets. And when it comes into the domestic markets, at LATAM, we take the role of using the bellies as a supplement to our core cargo operation. And we work very hard with the network team to try to figure out the right mix of planes to deploy in each market to be able to offer that capacity. And we're obviously scouting opportunities to deploy our freighters differently, if need be, to supplement those domestic markets. I mean, the 767 has advantage that even though it's a wide body, it can still land on shorter fields than a triple, and we can put those planes on niche markets within the region to supplement the opening of new industries in certain locations.
Okay, thank you. I think that also Total has announced recently a very interesting strategy to help also serving some of the local market, that is reaching an agreement with bus companies and taxi drivers to actually help moving your cargo. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Well, who leading the market today is who's delivering D+0, D+1, D+2 or 3. We've been working with the post office in Brazil in a new project to delivery in Amazon area D+3, and the whole areas in the country, D0 to D2, what means everybody can be a deliverer. That means the project. Bus companies can come and apply for pickup cargo. Taxi drivers in airports can be a deliverer. We transporting, delivering the post office areas in airports, they have enough delivery ports in the country. And now the gas stations business can be up supplying, delivering, pickup cargo. So this AP, we've been working with the post office, is something to leading the market in Brazil.
No, definitely very innovative. And again, when I go think about innovation and serving markets in a new way, I think back to you, Jitendra, about the technology, right? So how you are adjusting the technology to also helping not only the specialized product that we discussed, but also opening the market into some of these smaller places in the region.
I think the way our platform is today getting architected, the ability for any provider to service any kind of market is a lot easier. The idea is that is it extendable to, for example, to the partner community? Like we launched a product called as iPartner, through which you can have your partner, airlines as well as, some of the freight forwarders and the other providers actually access the system also in an easy and seamless manner. So there are things like those that we are investing in, and we actually already, it's working as a big part of our product also, to ensure that you have a true global reach that any airline can have using this platform. So that's an area of investment that continues, because thanks to the e-commerce and, distribution covering even the smaller cities and regions which you never thought of, and in a very multimodal manner. The other aspect is that, what happens once it leaves the airport, right? Our platform is getting extended beyond that a lot to take care of that also. Like we have a parallel logistics platform which is even working with some drone companies. We're extending beyond the airlines, working with, say, mining companies and oil and gas companies, as well as some of the pharmaceutical players, to actually help their product reach out to those smaller and more difficult markets in a very, very seamless manner. So we even have some of the drone companies as our customers now. So our platform is truly getting more extensible, and we believe that there'll be no one way of taking the cargo or the product to the end consumer. Like there'll be multiple channels that'll be there. So we clearly are trying to figure all of that piece out together,
Okay, so it looks that definitely technology is helping. However, I want to go back to Diego to understand, what are the challenges that you guys are facing from the airline perspective in 2024? And I would like you to also articulate challenges that and how you're trying to address those. And I would like you to differentiate between what is internal to the airline itself, and then what is more external, so related to governments, like organizations, right, and how they can help.
Sure. Well, first of all, looking inside, one of the main challenges is always, what equipment, what freighter you have, what belly capacity you have, if that meets the need with the market. So the good thing to have both aircrafts that with a freighter you can meet the network that you intended to, independent of the passenger side, because we do fly for some specific routes that there's no enough passenger to have a decent belly capacity to meet the demand. So the challenge is always how do you fly enough on the high usage rate, because in the freighter side you don't have backup airplanes, you have to operate them all, at least for the airline. So you do have to have a very good standard of where you capturing, but also looking at the customer very closely to fly to niche markets, as you were mentioning, not only to the big ones as VCP, as Santiago, as Bogota, but also to smaller markets. So that's the challenge of how do you jungle between the capacity that you can put on with the demand that sometimes it's obvious, sometimes you have to create demand or have to support a specific industry. So that's what we're always looking for. in our region, for sure. I mean, take a look in Latin America. For example, Central America was one of the, summing up some of the countries in Central America, they were in the biggest volume increase before the COVID hit it versus today, for example. We have flowers out of there, we have fish out of there, so we're exporting and importing many very different from what we did before. And then what we do not control, I mean, the challenges outside of the airline, it's also, there's one thing that is hitting everybody right now is the aircraft, right? All the delays in the industry, everything that the industry is not putting up to the speed. So sometimes, for example, the freighters work much more on the converting side than the full freighter for our markets. And since there's not enough aircraft on the passenger side, so they're renewing the leases as a passenger and putting pressure on the freighter side. So I was in a different event 2 weeks ago, and everybody in the cargo side, everybody was complaining on the delays, not on the medium-sized wide bodies, but also the big ones, as 777s and 350s. And the end of, for example, the 76 program freighter also will take a hit. So those kind of things that hit us outside of what we can manage, you have also to be clever enough on how to perform. So we are, for example, we used to have in our other company, Aviation in Mexico, for example, we used to operate 76s, 200, A300s, and that's an old fleet that we, by design, we stopped to replace with 330s. So we can have part of the problems that we see in the industry we could have with a better and newer freighter with the 330s that we just received and we keep receiving. So that's kind of the challenge of how do you face inside and how can you face it outside as well. So I would say that.
So definitely it's an attractive market, but it's not sort of complication and challenges. Basil, from an integrated perspective from FedEx, are you experiencing similar challenges to the ones that Diogo just described?
Well, I would say some of the biggest challenges that we're facing right now is what Andres raised earlier, which is trade facilitation. We are finding post-pandemic a lot of changes that are happening with government regulations, and as a result, it's hurting the competitiveness of certain markets. I think we're in a golden opportunity and golden time with what's happening geopolitically out to the West. And there are markets that can really benefit for getting more ingrained into the supply chain business. They talk always about China plus one. China plus one doesn't need to be Malaysia or Thailand. It could be Costa Rica, it could be Mexico, it could be Uruguay. And so there is a big opportunity here, but there are a lot of onerous rules and regulations that are being put. And even the requirements as part of World Trade, WTO requirements for customs modernization, a lot of countries are modernizing their systems with the same antiquated processes. They're not improving their processes. So this creates a little bit more of a burden. And we know, I think we all would agree with this, is that we create access for communities and people through the services that we provide. And these type of regulations are hampering the ability to create access, which ultimately creates wealth for communities.
No, thank you. Paulo, back to you. Again, your airline is expecting a very ambitious growth during the coming years, but right now also you need to grow that airline, right? And we just heard Andres, Diogo, sorry, talking about like the challenges with the capacity, with the aircraft. What are the challenges that you are experiencing and how you're actually addressing those?
The Brazilian market, like he said, is a challenger. The rules is changing every year. What this means? More taxes, more problems, more everything in a bad way. But We expecting to bring Comac C919 to be a passenger and cargo side in Brazil. We order big order in China right now. We expecting to do exactly what he said. China D+1, using the biggest carryout in the world. That's your challenge. And we want to do that D+1 in Brazil, and everywhere in the country. Technology plus delivering. Let me give you an aspect of that. Amazon, we have several cities unserviceable by small aircraft like ATRs. But it's accessible by small aircraft like Cessnas. Why not give the opportunity to the pilots who travel in these routes delivering cargo to us by an app? Why not giving the person who is driving his car to some cities around the country, alone sometimes, deliver the cargo in his city, make some money? That's the future. That's the way it's going to be, and that's what we've been working together with the post office.
Thank you. Jitendra, I wanted to ask you, I mean, you've been in the panel several times, and I'm always curious to understand from the technology perspective, how is Latin America carriers, without obviously getting into any specifics, compares to maybe other regions in the world? How, are we getting better, or where will you position the Latin American carriers?
I'm sitting amongst the Latin American carriers, so I don't know if I should be super honest.
Be careful.
But that's what I'm saying. I'm sitting between 4 of them. They're going to kill me later if I say the truth. No, but honestly, I think one advantage of technology is that it forces people to converge and move things faster. Like you have no choice but to follow the technology curve. That's the advantage that I see. And hence, when I see and today, our platform carries about, we did the recent estimate that about 55% of the world's airbill volume goes through our platform today. So we have a huge amount of data of how the various countries, geographies, players are actually performing. You do see that there is a variation across the industries, across the regions. But I think that is less contributed to the technology. It's more contributed to the regulatory aspect in those countries. And also the willingness of how you're able to capture this so-called trade, which is changing in a very, very different manner, right? As the composition of the cargo that you carry is continuously changing, what role you're going to play, and how you're going to manage the yield versus the load factor curve, right? Like you look at multiple aspects. I think there is a regulatory challenge of the region, and then there is a challenge related to each of the players in the market, how they're going to maximize their output for all of that. So I think regional barriers have come down from technology perspective, but the regulatory barriers, like what you were just saying, right, that how can you have custom movement just very, very seamless, for example. That's a very big problem. And when we look at, we can only give a technology solution to manage this as smoothly as we can. But there is a point at which even the technology starts to break down, right? And you have to have more regulatory changes to do that. Unfortunately, I see the world is moving in more different direction altogether, where more regulatory aspects are being put in place, more data needs to be captured, and that's making it harder for both players and platforms like us to kind of provide that balance of your ability to actually still serve the customer in a very, very quicker and seamless manner. So I think it's a little more complicated situation than what I thought it would be, but definitely overall I see LATAM has made a huge progress. Like if you look at this region, especially after COVID, I think it's made a huge, significant progress vis-a-vis the world.
Okay, well, glad to hear also that progress. An area that is always very close to my heart, and I know that also Andres is something very important to him, is obviously safety is at the forefront of everything that we do in this industry, and transporting lithium batteries is a topic that we like to discuss in this type of forums. So Andres, for your perspective, can you describe what has been the evolution, right, during the past few years? Are we doing better, or are we still not maybe progressing at the pace that we should? And maybe the second part of the question is, if we need to make some changes, can ALTA or other organizations help to accelerate maybe this change to ensure that safety movement of batteries?
I think actually, if I had to answer the question about challenges, that would be number one challenge. Because I think all of us in the stage, and probably most of the people in this room, I mean, would classify safety and security as their number one priority. And unfortunately, lithium batteries are more prevalent than they were. I mean, they are on almost every single device we all use. And they are dangerous if not properly carried. And from that perspective, it's extremely important that as an industry, we acknowledge that and we move towards standards that generate safer carriage of lithium batteries. And to that end, I mean, it's easy to talk about lithium batteries that are properly declared, that we know where they are, that we can segregate them properly, which is the right way to do it. The problem is people are trying to sneak them by, they hide them, and this is literally, I mean, you wouldn't believe how many times this happens. I'm seeing Basil smile. I mean, it happens to all of us. And we have to be very diligent in scanning and searching for those batteries before they reach the plane, because they're dangerous if not. And to that end, I think that when you're dealing with people that are committing a crime, literally, by shipping undeclared hidden lithium batteries that are improperly packed, they're putting the industry in danger. And it's very important that the industry really takes this head on. We prosecute as an industry these criminals, because that's what they are. And we enforce the rules that we should be enforcing. This is a danger that's clear and present and needs to be addressed urgently. And IATA is taking some measures, but it's also going to take all of our governments to enforce this in order to ensure that the industry remains safe.
No. Basil, I know that you were nodding right into the safety and how the industry needs to work collaboratively to solve this. Can you maybe elaborate some of the maybe technology or what FedEx is doing to actually help to prevent this hiding the batteries, and if it happens, how do you make sure that there is safe to carry those?
Yeah, as Andres said, it's very critical. Safety is number one. When we look at what we have tried to do, one of the biggest things, and it ends up being also a customer experience thing, is you want to have visibility of where those packages are. In our case, as an integrator, we do close to 16 million packages a day, right? It's a significant amount of volume, and you have to make sure you've got the right kind of visibility, not only to the contents of the information, what's in there so you can handle it properly, but also provide the visibility to customers, because the information about the package is oftentimes as important as the package itself. You want to do something with it, and if there's something that changes, you want to have visibility to that. One of the innovations that we've been working on, it's been close to about 15 years now, but finally getting there, is we now have these tags, almost like an Apple AirTag. Yeah, I'm sorry, I keep forgetting the name. But it's a device we call SensorWare ID, and we're now starting to put that on certain shipments. And then rather than getting somewhere between 25 and 50 scans a journey, we're now getting them every few minutes. And so now you get a lot more visibility, and you can make some interventions as necessary. If something needs to be put on the side because it may not be safe for any reason, and we have the ability then to recognize it and move that across. I think it's interesting developments. I think we'll see more of that in the industry. But the big challenge, I think, is really from an IT side with the amount of data that is coming in. It's great, but you got to be able to manage that and take an action with it.
And I think that we have someone who knows a lot about data. And I know that we're getting close to the end, but to me, before we just do a final round with all the panelists, if you look at the news, Gen AI is everywhere, right? It has been an exponential growth during the past 12 months. So maybe Jitendra, if you can talk about what's the status of the cargo industry and how some of the areas that, for example, Basil was just highlighting about like the amount of data. Are we using Gen AI right now in cargo, or if we are not fully using it, what is needed?
I think we're using aspects of Gen AI, let's put it that way. I don't think we have yet reached that stage where we can truly use Gen AI. I think we are probably, I wouldn't put a timeline on that, but I think we are a little far away from that stage because it's not about whether technology exists or no. It's about what problems are you trying to solve and what use cases you're looking at. Like we have, in our organization now, created a separate team altogether to look at all the possible use cases that can be addressed through a Gen AI kind of an initiative across not just cargo platform, but other platforms also. So that's the initiative that we are heavily investing in right now. We identified use cases, for example, the one that he just talked about, right? There's so much data that's coming in, right? What do you do with the data? I mean, is it that you just collect it and then forget about it, or do you put it to some use, right? For example, so that you can make it more predictable. Like you can see patterns of how, things move from certain airport to the airport. For example, you can easily find patterns of how, certain dangerous goods can be carried or can be shipped, right? Like there are patterns you can easily, using the data, you can easily find those patterns, for example, right? So I think a lot of us will have to be worked along with the industry, along with the players to find out what problems we're trying to solve. Rather than just saying, hey, here is a platform which can do everything for you. I don't think it's going to really work truly like that. Especially for cargo industry, which is very operations heavy. It is not a consumer driven that, hey, I can personalize for a consumer. I can give them better offers. On the passenger side, I can give you a lot of ideas on how it can be done. But whereas on the cargo side, the problem is a lot more complex because you're dealing in global markets, operationally very, very complex, moving cargoes which are extremely diverse in nature now. So the problem statements are becoming bigger and bigger. Trying to make sense out of that and hence what problem will you solve? I think that's a better approach. And that's what we're trying to do. Like, a month from now, we'll be inviting all of our customers to Bangalore. And then they'll be meeting us. We'll have one of the largest gatherings. And this is one of the topics that we are picking up that where should we invest in the Gen AI? Like we want to hear from the players also what they want to do, how they want to solve the problem. So, but yes, technology will make it possible for sure.
Very good. So I know that we are running out of time, so I would like to hear from each of you what's the top priority for the cargo industry and for your company in particular, obviously if you can share. So again, in 12 months from now, we can see how we progress against that top priority. Paulo?
Well, what I have to say over here is very simple. If you want to be in a competition in the world to sell any product, you have to hire an airline. We are here as airlines to serve the market and make quicker and make your company competitive and make money for you and make the world change. During the pandemic, we supply everything what the people needs in the home. And we are here standing to do that and make your company grow with us. Airline business and the cargo side is one of the most important keys you can have in your company, ever and ever. We are here to deliver your package.
Very good. Basil?
Yeah, I would say the opportunities in trade facilitation, I may have mentioned that before, but no, working with industry associations like this as a team, as a group, as a body, making sure to help influence and increasing trade. We see it with the countries. When you can look at the comparison on the charts that were presented. The markets that are facilitating more trade are creating more wealth for their respective markets, and you are seeing the growth in economy and helping the communities that they serve.
Yeah, from our perspective, I think it's very simple, and that's the philosophy we've been following for 5 years, because technology will keep evolving, it'll keep coming. We had blockchain earlier, now we suddenly have AI and all that. But our philosophy around two things remains, the core of our investment. One is, can we give you a product that can help you increase your revenue? Can you launch more products to the market? Can you go quickly to the market? And at the same time, can we make sure that you do it in as efficient manner as you can, so that we can help you with the operational efficiency also. So once we keep those two levers in mind, I think the rest of the investments can just work around that.
Well, for us, in terms of priority, I think the number one Still the safety, because just one event, what happened, all the strategy is gone. So first one, safety always, in terms of even lithium batteries, all the trainings, everything. So that's our priority. But besides that as well, is having the team of experts to serve the customer. I mean, what the customer needs. If it's challenging times as was COVID, or easier, let's say, easier times as after COVID, how can we serve customers? So.
Bring us home.
For us, I mean, I would put it on two levels again, one internal and one externally. Internally, it's how we reimagine LATAM cargo going forwards. I mean, we just finished a big investment cycle in technology. I thought that was the end of it. And now we're kicking up a new one, which is completely different architecture, different setup for the company. We think the new technological tools that are available would enable us to do things quite different in the next couple of years. And it's basically rebuilding the whole company from the ground up on a new way of doing things that enables us to be productive. I mean, this is an industry in which cost is always a pressure. Productivity is the key to address that. And bringing technology to the table allows us to be more productive and serve our customers better. And now externally, I think there's two things that are extremely relevant. One is infrastructure. I mean, trade facilitation, I agree with Basil, it's key. But if we don't have the infrastructure to address it, I mean, GRU, the largest airport in South America, collapsed again this week because they couldn't handle the cargo volumes that were flowing through the airport. 114 pallets were left on the tarmac under the rain because they couldn't put it inside the warehouse. Those types of things cannot happen if we want to have a powerful region from an export perspective. And then another one is sustainability. We haven't touched on it, but sustainability, especially on the CO2 emission side, needs to be addressed at an industry level in order to have the right frameworks that enable us to push towards our goals. And that needs to be an industry-led effort with a clear framework that allows us to address the challenge.
Well, so I hope that we address the three objectives that we have for this session. So give everyone, Jose Ricardo.
I cannot lose the opportunity because for me it's amazing. I love this panel to talk about this subject. I really think that cargo came during the pandemic to say, hey, I'm here and this is very important. But my question goes for all of you is like, and maybe Andres, you are in the group of IATA for cargo. What are we missing here in Latin America? What can we do? I mean, we understand that technology is very important, in especially process the information, everything. But it seems to me that this is inside the company. And there is a real problem, like customers, I mean, they need to change the process. Any country in Latin America and Caribbean at least has this like a good system that we could work on, because we tried to put this together. This panel started 2 years ago, I think. And I think that's I learned a lot. And I'm asking this because I'll give you an example. I spent 5 days as the president of ANAC. Cargo was never was in the regulatory agenda. Why? I don't know. There is something that we need as association, and consider that you guys are members, and we want to be there for you. What should we do? Or what is the system that we need? What do you need to this facilitation process in the country in Latin America and Caribbean? Please help us, because I spoke with Tiaka. We tried to do something together, but nothing came like, it's a system. We have to go for the global customers association, whatever, and say, hey, you need to use this system. How do you see, how can we help that? Because I heard about some process that took about, I don't know, 10 days, and that should be done in about 2 hours in other parts of the world. I mean, it's a loss of money. So how can we do? What do you think about? Help us to have this agenda, or even to put in the agenda of the regulatory authority in any country.
Let me try to take the first crack at this one. I'm going to take off my LATAM hat off. I'm going to put my head of the Cargo Advisory Council for IATA hat on. And I think the first thing that's different between passenger and cargo is this is a global industry. I mean, what happens, I mean, a lot of our freight flows are coming from China, are coming from Malaysia, from different regions, and they gotta connect through the system. And within that, there's 14 touch points typically with different stakeholders. So unless we address the systemic part of it at a global level with a single standard, there's little value in doing like regional solutions. So that's why it's important to align completely and what we can do as ALTA is get our governments to engage on that. The example of one record, which is the IATA standard, the standard that IATA is pushing for data transfer, would allow us to improve significantly on transit times, reduce costs for our customers, reduce the sort of the tax, the customs clearance process in each of our countries. That's a net gain for everybody involved in the value chain. So it's getting the governments to commit to those standards and setting up the sort of the instances in which we can talk about this, getting rid of paper and being more digital. That's one. The other one, as I said before, is infrastructure. The state of some of our airports, it's unacceptable, okay? Look at new facilities being built in the region in which cargo facilities are located from the tarmac, and we're moving perishables, and I think to Basil's point, I mean, you're moving perishables that are the bread and butter of the South American export market with 45, 60-minute tarmac times in the sun. I mean, you understand what's going to happen to that fruit, that asparagus, that fish, exposed to that because we didn't think cargos being an integral part of the process, and we haven't devised the layout of the airport the right way. So infrastructure is certainly something that we can address as a whole. And the other one is sustainability. I mean, I think as an industry, I mean, let me just go on a small tangent about SAF. When you sell SAF on the cargo market, you're selling B2B, it's not B2C, right? So you're tailoring that solution to your specific sector. The number of requirements that we have about SAF are literally equivalent to the number of people we're talking about. The amount of reduction of CO2 per shipment, the type of feedstock, the location where the feedstock was generated. It's extremely complex. So unless we come up with a framework that simplifies that and enable us to interact on a much swifter and agile fashion with our shippers and our customers, unless we do that, we're going to hit a wall, and we'll never be able to capitalize on the opportunities that for the industry. So I think it's homogenizing, sort of having a simpler to work with our customers. So those are three things I think as an association like ALTA would help us on.
Thank you, Andres. Let me just, the system of IATA is actually, I believe that was very well understood. The way that I saw last year when we were trying to push this, the system was very well understood for the country. Do you see a possibility, which organization do you think that should ALTA, or together with IATA, of course, because this is global, I agree, we should go for which organization? Because what we see is that when you go for the states, they say, oh, I understand the system, I understand the process. I mean, the concept to send, the data that you need, but they need to build a system. And this system seems that doesn't exist as for the government. How do you see that? Or anyone?
Sorry, I'm gonna pass it to the panel, but let me just say one thing. It's not about the system, it's about the standard. Yeah. I mean, Total may have a different system required than Avianca may have a different one than FedEx, we have a different, we all will buy different systems. Yatin is trying to convince me to buy his, but like, we all have different systems. The important thing is that we have a single standard to interact so that we can connect. I mean, on the passenger side, we have invented, that already exists. You can buy a ticket and In the airline industry, that's impossible, and that's unacceptable in the 21st century. So it's more about the standard than about the system. I don't know what.
No, I mean, amen. All the points that Andres raised. And just to give some examples, right? I mean, it's a standard, and the interface and the mechanism how you share some of the data is inconsistent. There are some markets, and I'll give examples in the Caribbean, right? Digital image of the commercial invoice, okay, but they also want a proof of payment, right? Okay, and how do we may have it electronically, but you can't transfer it via file. You have to download it as a PDF and then upload it in the system, transaction by transaction. These are the type of issues that we deal with that greatly slow the movement of goods. And that's where I think we have a big opportunity to standardize, and things would move a lot more quickly, and we would see an increase in trade as a result of that.
And Jose, that's what I was saying, when we were looking at, for us, as these requirements vary from region to region, country to country, he's right. The passenger movement is a lot more streamlined. I think the same importance has not been given to the cargo, in spite of the distribution of cargo through, is going to become much more relevant as commerce keeps picking up, right? Especially e-commerce, right? I think that part has to be thought through. It's not an easy thing because different regulatory agencies across the world becomes a challenge. I think it's a lack of IATA's ability to put the process. It's like, how do you align that the custom movement is seamless? How do you align that processes that are followed in Asia actually get seamlessly followed here in, Latin American market also? I think that is where IATA has a big role to play. If you reduce the number of touch points by 30% also, right? The efficiency just goes up so much, right? You don't have to solve all the problems, right? But can you pick the top 2, 3 real burning problems and remove them out of the equation, right?
Yeah, not much to add, but one thing, two examples. One is the standard, which the way we communicate with customs, it's a big thing. Different countries, different ways, not a standard, no process, so you can leverage much on cost, efficient, and also SLAs on performance. And the other thing is
is still rising, and this is very important for the growth of air transportation in our region. We also can see a lot of infrastructure investments that allows more airports, more infrastructure with security and safety to allow better operation. We can see a lot of partnerships and mergers between airlines. Partnerships allow connectivity because you are a small airline, you can have a big airline to help you connecting people. But we see a lot of challenges too. Those who were in the first panel saw the numbers of the rising cost of fuel, the money devaluation that we saw in the region, so it increased operational costs. We had sometimes limited infrastructure. We had a huge agenda of environmental sustainability that we are always discussing, how to be more efficient, how to work with better fuels for aviation. And we have a lot of economic and financial challenges that we also saw in our first panel today, showing the numbers of the airlines of the region. And not least is the regulation and policies that always affect our industry in our countries. So these are the main challenges that we have. Well, now I'm gonna ask both of us. Well, I have two very important people here. Beatriz Guillen, that's the Global Sales and Customer Loyalty Director of Iberia. It's a big and traditional airline working in our region with a strong culture connection with Latin America, so has a strong presence in Latin America. And I also have Gilberto Salcedo, that's a Vice President of ProColombia. ProColombia is an organization that's responsible for promoting tourism investments in Colombia and promoting Colombia outside the country. So it's a different views, a view for the big airline and a view of the one that's trying to promote its country and try to develop its country through connection to connectivity to tourism. So I will start asking them, how do you see the growth of their transportation in the region, and what are the main obstacles that you see right now? Please, Beatriz, start.
Bueno, me paso a español. Nosotros en la región vimos después del COVID que fue una región muy resiliente, prácticamente la más resiliente de toda nuestra red. Y eso era un reto en sí mismo porque no había sido así antes del COVID. En el pasado, de media, un vuelo de Iberia, el 20% de la gente que iba dentro originaba en Latinoamérica. Después del COVID, esa resiliencia y ese crecimiento hizo que a la fecha más o menos entre el 50 y el 55% de la gente que viaja en un vuelo de Iberia origine en Latinoamérica. Eso hace que nuestra apuesta por Latinoamérica sea muy obvia, ¿verdad? Es una región que todavía está en constante crecimiento, no tiene signos de caer y ahora, a ver, los obstáculos son a dónde llegar, a dónde conviene hacerlo, cuáles son los países que te facilitan que puedas llegar ahí y obviamente el crecimiento y la falta de aviones que tenemos en la industria. Pero ese para nosotros es el reto, cómo invertir más en Latinoamérica, porque vemos que existe ahí la demanda, el negocio es todavía muy boyante, pero tenemos muchas faltas de recursos y en algunos casos, sobre todo en ciudades secundarias de Latinoamérica, no hay tanto incentivo para crecer.
Incentivos
en todo sentido, infraestructura, ¿verdad? Permisos, facilidad de operación, apuestas público-privadas por desarrollar un destino, ¿verdad? Eso está muy desarrollado en Europa,
sí,
pero no necesariamente en Latinoamérica, y eso tenemos que incentivarlo.
Perfecto, perfecto. Gilberto.
Bueno, no, muy buenos días. Dado que somos el único obstáculo entre la conferencia y la playa o los vuelos de todos.
Botelho, José Ricardo está de short, de bermuda. Sí, está listo.
Nada, queríamos hacer el panel en español precisamente para hacerlo en nuestra lengua materna y de pronto algo más entretenido. Bien, varias cosas. Yo creo que hablabas hace un instante, Marcelo, de todos estos obstáculos que al final del día también son grandes oportunidades y en el caso de Colombia hay que recordar varias cosas. Lo primero es que Colombia es un país que tiene un pasado pues, importante y muy focalizado en temas del conflicto armado, de violencia, de seguridad, que nos ha hecho históricamente un país resiliente y eso viene acompañado necesariamente de una cantidad de instrumentos que hemos venido aplicando con el tiempo para promover Colombia como un destino turístico que hoy nos atrevemos a decir con mucho orgullo es un destino de talla internacional y de hecho que nos acompañen de alguna manera los resultados y los números recientes. Cuando vemos esta historia además que también está atravesada, como bien lo recordaba Beatriz, por el COVID, pues lo que estamos viendo también es una gran oportunidad y sobre todo de poner las cosas en su lugar. Y aquí yo, cuando hablamos de la aviación como el más poderoso motor de crecimiento, claramente cuando un país toma la decisión, toma la determinación de priorizar la aviación como uno de los pilares fundamentales para la promoción del turismo, va por el camino correcto. Y aquí quiero decirlo con claridad también, en el caso de Colombia es aún más interesante porque el gobierno nacional ha puesto además el turismo en el centro de la conversación política y económica de la nación. Hoy hablamos de sostenibilidad, hablamos de transición energética, de transición económica y la verdad es que todas esas transiciones son y serán posibles siempre y cuando existan otras fuentes de recursos que permitan ese tránsito hacia esa nueva economía o esa economía limpia, por llamarlo de alguna manera. Y ahí es donde el turismo entra a ser parte precisamente de esas industrias verdes que al final vienen a apalancar este propósito. Y ustedes dirán, verdes, pero con todos estos retos que tenemos en sostenibilidad, sobre todo en transporte aéreo, todavía un plan muy a largo plazo. Yo en esto tiendo a ser tremendamente pragmático también y para volver precisamente a poner el transporte aéreo arriba. Y es, si bien el transporte aéreo es un contaminante evidentemente en emisiones, imagínense ustedes destinos que hoy dependen exclusivamente del turismo y del transporte aéreo para que este sea posible. Si no existiera el transporte aéreo, ¿en qué situación estarían esos destinos turísticos? Solamente pensar en destinos bien en el Caribe, en África y otros tantos que como Colombia también están haciendo una apuesta decidida sobre el turismo, repito, como una de esas industrias que permita el tránsito económico y el tránsito energético. En esto, por eso Colombia ha puesto, repito, arriba el transporte aéreo. Cuando llega el COVID, además, duplicamos los esfuerzos y un poco yendo hacia el tema de los incentivos, Beatriz, nos parece importantísimo, por ejemplo, en su momento la reducción del IVA, la reducción incluso de aranceles para la entrada de partes para los repuestos de las aeronaves. Todo eso al final del día permitió, y no lo digo en teoría, cuando estábamos en pleno COVID y hablamos más o menos del año 2021, Colombia se situó como el país número 16 en recuperación de la conectividad aérea en el mundo. Y esto permitió también un salto, repito, acompañando al turismo, en donde cerramos un año 2023 con más de 6.100.000 viajeros, visitantes extranjeros llegando al país. Esto produjo además una generación de más de 9.000 millones de dólares, $9 billion, en la economía colombiana, y con ello, evidentemente, un propósito que ya les mencionaba y que este año en particular seguimos creciendo. Al primer semestre de este año, 15% en divisas, y a septiembre de este año creciendo 9% nuevamente en pasajeros, después de un año histórico que sitúa a Colombia, según Forward Keys, el año 2023, como el segundo país con mayor tasa de crecimiento del mundo. Perdón la extensión.
No, y si me dejan a mí un poco seguir en esa línea, nosotros acabamos de terminar un estudio sobre precisamente el impacto, no necesariamente medioambiental, y a mí me gusta siempre reforzar esto, que los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible son 30 y el impacto medioambiental es 1, pero sobre todo en nuestra región es súper importante también los objetivos de empleo de calidad, de reducir el hambre y la pobreza, de vivienda digna, y esto va desde el lado de la empresa privada y en este caso las aerolíneas, sobre todo por la parte de generación de riqueza, de empleo y de PIB. Nosotros acabamos de terminar un estudio en el que los vuelos de Iberia a Latinoamérica han generado 156.000 empleos, entre directos, indirectos e inducidos. El 73% de estos empleos son en Latinoamérica. Entonces, son 73%. Entonces, es una cifra muy importante porque a lo que estaba diciendo Gilberto, la generación de más vuelos genera aportes a una economía extendida que de no existir eso en una gran ciudad tal vez pasa desapercibido, pero en pequeños lugares en donde llega la aviación es algo que puede hacer la diferencia entre la pobreza y tener empleo de calidad y tener un nivel digno de vida. Anualmente estos vuelos, también el análisis dice que han generado 2.700 millones de euros en el PIB, de los cuales 1.300 son en los países de Latinoamérica. Y hay países en los que estos 1.300 son, lugares como México, hasta 200 millones, Colombia está cerca de los 150 millones. O sea que el impacto de la aviación es cierto, tenemos un impacto y tenemos un deber con la sostenibilidad medioambiental, pero también tenemos un deber con también la sostenibilidad del lado del impacto económico y la riqueza que generamos.
Pretty good. One thing that's difficult for our countries, in our region, is how to spend money, the government money, public money, because we all have restrictions on budget. So whenever an economic sector requests the government to help, it's usually some subsidies or some tax reductions, and it's again hard because the governments are not rich and they need their budget to be spending something that maybe has more effect or has more essential needs. How do you work with that kind of restriction in Colombia, with budget restriction from the government? What are the measures and how creative can you be in order to promote air transport and the development that you're seeking?
Bueno, gracias por la pregunta, Marcelo, porque creo que abre un interrogante que es interesante, sobre todo de cara a cuando estás en promoción. Creo que los recursos, primero, no hay que verlos nunca como un gasto, sino como una inversión. Y de hecho, esa es la visión que tenemos en Colombia y por lo tanto, desde ProColombia, cada peso que invertimos en promoción tiene una trazabilidad en términos de retorno. Fíjate, y voy a hacer, aun cuando a veces las comparaciones son odiosas, voy a hacer una comparación no solamente en términos de montos, sino también de eficiencias que logra la promoción. En el caso de Colombia, en el año 2023, cerramos, como te decía, un año histórico, pero además cuando lo miras en montos destinados a la promoción, Colombia, bueno, te voy a poner los casos de Costa Rica y Perú respectivamente. Costa Rica tuvo una inversión cercana a los 19 millones de dólares, con llegadas cercanas a los 3.200.000 viajeros internacionales. Perú, un presupuesto cercano a los 30 millones de dólares y unas llegadas cercanas a los 4 millones de viajeros. Y en el caso colombiano fueron 17 millones de dólares, menos que los dos anteriores, y 6.100.000 viajeros de llegada. Luego, el reto no solamente es conseguir los recursos, es verlos como una inversión, es adicionalmente tener medido cada peso en términos de retorno para el país. De hecho, el gasto promedio en Colombia de un viajero está del orden de los $1.500 en una estancia cercana entre 8 y 10 días en el país. Pero adicionalmente, el efecto, y aquí vuelvo otra vez a retomar lo que decía anteriormente frente al transporte aéreo, el efecto que genera tener una buena conectividad, que en el caso de Colombia, veían ustedes los números que mostraban solamente ahora en Estados Unidos en términos del crecimiento de la conectividad con Colombia, pero en general, para ese año 2023, crecimos prácticamente en un 10% en frecuencias, más de un 9% en sillas, y no solamente fue el crecimiento por sí mismo del país como un todo. Cuando hablamos, por ejemplo, de nuevas rutas, más del 60%, el 62% de las nuevas rutas fueron a destinos diferentes a Bogotá, que era normalmente el sitio que concentraba la mayor parte de las rutas en el país. Luego también es cómo generas un efecto también en diferentes regiones, todas con equilibrios y perspectivas diferentes. En este sentido, creo que el reto, más allá de sacar de donde no hay, porque creo que eso no es posible, es ver que cada peso que se puede poner en inversión, en promoción, tiene un retorno y un efecto multiplicador para el país. De hecho, cuando hablamos de inversión en promoción en Colombia, también la hacemos de la mano de las aerolíneas. Tenemos hoy en día 27 aerolíneas internacionales operando en el país. Con todas y cada una de ellas tenemos agreements, tenemos acuerdos de cooperación en promoción. Promocionamos esos destinos hacia los cuales están volando estas aerolíneas. Y adicionalmente hacemos campañas conjuntas.
Acuerdos con ProColombia.
Dime.
Acuerdos con ProColombia.
Acuerdos con ProColombia. Y ahí voy también un poco a las facilidades que tienen que tener los países. Colombia tiene un esquema de recursos públicos invertidos hacia la promoción. Estos son públicos, pero ProColombia es una entidad que, si bien atiende las líneas de política del gobierno nacional, tiene una estructura mucho más flexible y más enfocada hacia el sector privado. De hecho, nuestro trabajo de todos los días es con el sector privado, con aerolíneas, con prestadores de servicios turísticos, con turoperadores, con agencias de viajes, y es con ellos que logramos ampliar el efecto de esos recursos que invertimos en promoción. Es decir, oímos mucho de esos public-private partnerships. Creo que esta es una manera muy clara de cómo, a través de una entidad que tiene esa flexibilidad, se concretan esas alianzas.
Very good. Very good. And I understand that Iberia is working and traveling to a lot of different countries in the region, has a lot of partnership with this kind of organization as ProColombia. Do you want to share your experience with that?
Completamente de acuerdo con lo que decía Gilberto. Yo siempre, cuando estoy en Colombia y alguien me entrevista, digo, es que todo el mundo quiere viajar a Colombia, pero mucho de eso es precisamente por esa esos aliados que existen entre asociaciones públicos y privadas, que no van necesariamente con, venga, yo lanzo publicidad en todo el planeta para atraer gente, no. Es que hay que ir específicamente a esos nichos, a esas agencias de viajes, a esas aerolíneas, porque ahí realmente se obtiene ese rendimiento. Nosotros en Iberia, dentro de Latinoamérica, creo que tenemos colaboración con todas las entidades de turismo y promoción de todo el continente. Y son cosas que funcionan bastante, porque desde algo que podría parecer tonto, como pintar un avión de Surf City en El Salvador, que ese avión va recorriendo toda Europa, hasta tener un anuncio dentro de nuestras pantallas de avión para poder mostrar el destino, o participar en una feria especializada de turoperaciones, como puede ser la de Berlín o Fitur, en donde vamos de la mano con el país y visitamos a nuestros principales clientes. Y yo he tenido reuniones en las que junto conmigo y el país de turno vamos y visitamos a ver quiénes son los especialistas, por ejemplo, en viajes de lujo o de aventura a Sudamérica. Y vamos y juntos hacemos ese tipo de visitas. Entonces, eso, el rendimiento que te trae es muchísimo mayor que simplemente tener una estrategia de, pues yo pongo publicidad en Londres, porque eso no necesariamente atrae al público correcto.
Interesante, Beatriz, es que como está presente...
Hoy ya te pasaste.
En donde tenemos una narrativa situada alrededor del país de la belleza, Colombia, el país de la belleza, haciendo evidentemente alarde de alguna manera, en el sentido muy positivo de la palabra, de nuestras riquezas naturales, culturales, de los valores que llevamos inmersos como la sostenibilidad, en el cual creemos profundamente, y cómo el turismo puede ser una de esas industrias que se ponga al servicio de la protección y de la conservación de estos activos de naturaleza y cultura. Pero de allí se derivan unos pilares estratégicos, entre los cuales está precisamente una división del país a través de 6 grandes regiones turísticas, lo cual nos permite diferenciar claramente un país absolutamente biodiverso y absolutamente lleno de contrastes, pero al mismo tiempo también nos permite segmentar. Y por cada una de estas regiones, hoy podemos ver a nivel global, en cada uno de esos mercados prioritarios para Colombia de emisión de viajeros, cuáles son los productos turísticos que priorizamos en esos mercados. Y así, yendo a cada uno de los mercados, con los productos turísticos que son, identificando los perfiles de viajeros de cada uno de esos países, es que estamos yendo, como diríamos coloquialmente en Colombia, dejando de cazar con una atarraya de esas grandes redes que se lanzan al océano para empezar a cazar con mira telescópica. Y de allí los crecimientos que estamos viendo. Y esto, repito, solo de la mano del sector privado, que fundamentalmente es quien comercializa y aterriza esa oferta que tenemos en el país. Más operadores, diría yo, siempre buscando el balance de qué rutas, porque cada ruta, como aquí lo sabemos, es un mercado, qué tanto aguante una ruta 2, 3 o 4 operadores, como lo hemos visto en algunas de ellas, en otras no tanto, pero el punto es un buen balance, pero sobre todo un buen entorno para seguir haciendo esa inversión y esa apuesta por un país que hoy ve en el turismo una de las principales fuentes de generación de divisas y, por qué no decirlo nuevamente, de apoyar la transición energética y económica en Colombia con miras al cumplimiento de los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible.
Bueno, muy bueno. The experience we have in Brazil for the last, I don't know, 15 to 20 years, we try to increase competition, to reduce economic regulation, so we are able to deregulate everything that was economically possible. We changed the law, we created the civil aviation agency, we tried to give a good business environment. We also did some measures focused on attracting low-cost airlines, like allowing to charge by your luggage. It was not possible in the country. We even were able to extinguish the foreign ownership limit that we used to have. And everything was trying to attract more airlines. And obviously, we have the COVID that changed everything. But we cannot see so far the results of all these measures in a way that we can attract more airlines. What do you think that we have to do, like in Brazil, in other countries, in order to, is there any regulation, anything in the government that you see as, like in Iberia, you can see the countries in a more broader vision, you can see everybody. So maybe you can compare and see what are the best practices in some country that we still have to do in other countries in order to allow more airlines to be there.
A ver, yo para Brasil creo que una de las cosas que se han hablado mucho en estos 3 días es sobre la cantidad tan alta de demandas del consumidor que existen a las aerolíneas. O sea, nosotros manejamos en Brasil y yo estoy a cargo tanto de British Airways como de Iberia, y el backlog que tenemos de demandas que no es para el usuario final. El usuario final no te está demandando otro por su beneficio, es muy alto. Si eso se puede solucionar o no, no lo sé. Pero definitivamente es una barrera a la entrada que no está escrita, pero que es muy cierta. ¿Es posible de cambiar eso? Porque al final del día no es una ley que esté escrita en ningún lado. Pues no lo sé, pero estoy muy convencida de que es una barrera muy grande para nuevos entrantes que quieren participar ahí. Porque Brasil tiene muchísimo potencial, pero si tú sabes que de entrada podés año con año estar perdiendo 1, 2, 3, 4 millones de dólares por demandas del consumidor, que nuevamente no son del consumidor, es muy difícil entrar. Y eso no existe en ningún otro lado. Entonces, muchas veces las leyes están hechas, pero no están implementadas de forma que realmente le beneficie al consumidor o incluso a la aerolínea que quiere invertir ahí. Y para mí ese es el reto más grande en el caso de Brasil que tienen, porque no es sostenible como aerolínea hacerlo. Y tengo muchos amigos ahí que es que lo primero que piensan es, no, es que yo esto lo resuelvo fácil. Y no necesariamente es justo. Si existiera la regla, incluso la que acaba de poner Estados Unidos, que no es la más bonita y la más friendly, pero está escrita y dice, es tanto fechas, tantos todo, pues uno acepta y cumple. Pero cuando uno no sabe lo que le va a venir y después lo que podría haber costado 200 te cuesta 1.500 y así todos los días, es muy difícil competir en esas condiciones.
Legal uncertainty. And I think it's very specific for Brazil, as you mentioned, and this is good. We have to take Beatriz to the judiciary in Brazil so she can testify that. It's important because you have someone from a European airline that is working in all the region, and she's telling that, well, how this is different in Brazil. So specifically for Brazil, it's difficult to now have more operators because of that. And even, I think it's even difficult for the ones that are already there to increase the offer because you increase costs too, and they're facing higher costs. And in your view, anything that you can do?
De pronto,
Fortunately, you're not in Brazil, so you don't have to face this difficulty.
No, de pronto agregar que en el caso colombiano lo que estamos viendo es un fenómeno contrario y es una llegada de varios operadores, incluso algunos que son referencia a nivel global, como por ejemplo recientemente en junio de este año inició operaciones en Colombia Emirates, también inició operaciones Edelweiss conectando por primera vez Suiza con Zúrich, con Bogotá y con Cartagena. Gol también recientemente llegó al país conectando no solamente a Brasil, Sao Paulo, Bogotá, sino también la ruta entre Bogotá y Buenos Aires. Luego, si bien todos los países tenemos retos de orden regulatorio, entiendo además la preocupación constante y afortunadamente asociaciones como la que dirige José Ricardo ALTA y Ayara y otras tantas que hacen un muy buen trabajo, están todo el tiempo también advirtiendo un poco las consecuencias de cuando se toman malas decisiones de orden regulatorio. Yo creo que eso hay que cuidarlo y hay que cuidar en los países que todavía tenemos unos marcos regulatorios relativamente estables precisamente para seguir siendo competitivos, atractivos, y si un país, repito, prioriza el transporte aéreo, no solamente prioriza la entrada de aerolíneas, sino las condiciones para la entrada y para la atracción de las aerolíneas. Luego, eso tiene que ser, digamos, parte de la agenda, no solamente sectorial, sino de la agenda económica del país.
Very good. I think we have to take ProColombia to Brazil, yeah, and do a partnership with that. It's Philip from Bratur was, I don't know if he's here today, but it's a good view.
He's there at the back.
In the back? Yeah, hi Philip. I think this is a good view because it's difficult to express to the government and to express to the judiciary all the costs that we are creating in order to develop air transportation in Brazil. So I think that we should do this, repeat this panel in Rio. Yeah? We can invite them. Well, we'll have 3 minutes more. I don't know if you have any question from the audience. Anyone who wants to participate, or you're already ready to go to the beach? Well, I'll see if you have any final words that you...
No. José Ricardo, muchas gracias a ti, a ALTA, a todos ustedes y a ti, Marcelo, evidentemente, y a ti, Beatriz, por este panel que, siendo el último, no significó que fuera menos. Así que, de verdad, muchas gracias y un abrazo a todos.
Beatriz.
Un poco lo mismo. Muchísimas gracias a todos por estar aquí, por habernos aguantado hasta el último momento, y espero que tengan un buen viaje de regreso a casa.
Well, I want to thank you all for being here until now. Thank you very much for my panelists, for my friends here, for surviving until now and for being with us. It's, again, a great pleasure to be here again. Well, and thank you, José Ricardo, Nicole, everybody from the organization. Thank you.
Hi guys. Time to say goodbye, time to say thank you for everything, but also to express our gratitude and say, Beatriz, I would say that this, and we know that, where is Phil? Philip is here? In Bratur. He was here. Just to say that this issue out there, to say that is one of the most complex issues over there, because what is happening is that there is a law, actually there is a law that was voted in 2020, and they are not using. I mean, we have been talking, and the problem is not the executive brand, the problem is that the judicial system is not using. So it's a very complex. Now we have been talking with the Supreme Court. And try to figure out how can we do that. You said that is $1, $2, $3 million. That's right? Just to give you guys an idea, just for the Brazilian airlines, is more than $300 million a year because of that. It's unbelievable, but we are going to solve it. We are here for you. We are here for you. So thank you very much. Thank you for being here. But I'd like to also to express my gratitude for all of you, for your patience. I hope that you have enjoyed. Thank you, Bahamas, Mr. Dr. Homer, that is on his way. But also, I would like to express my thank you to my team. My team, because it was tough. To put this event together is tough. But we are doing this with our heart. We do this with very caring. And so on behalf of my team, and I'd like to say thank you, but also to say thank you for a very special woman. She's going to die because I'm going to do that. She's going to kill me because I'm going to do that. But Nicole, please stand up. She's gonna kill me. She's gonna kill me. Actually, you don't know, probably you see thousands and thousands of messages pushing you guys and push us, guys. We are, to do this, we are all together to support her job. Because she is the chairwoman, she deserves our respect as a professional, as a person. Because when I woke up, sometimes 5 a.m., in Panama, it's 3 a.m., and Nicole is there, hi boss, and this is very dangerous. So thank you, Nico. Thank you, Nicole, for everything. Thank you, and thank you for your family to understand that, to understand your job, to understand that everything that you put together. Thank you very much. Have a safe trip.